1 minute to go. Fasten the seatbelt. The pilot is working from home.
Looks like you're missing your flights.
No, you must be careful because the pilot is controlling from home the plane. Okay. Okay. Good morning, New York. Good evening, Malaysia, Singapore. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you on board again in a program, World Urban Campaign. Our city must be affordable with Danielle Grossenbacher as a chairlady and myself as a co-pilot, Rusmin Lawin from Jakarta, Indonesia. Okay, we have a very interesting topic today because for the last 3 years, we foresee, especially in US, in Florida, in some Texas city, there's a lot of senior housing living lifestyle development in the suburb area that designed to be the triggers point to attract people to live there, and also of course buying property. So this is very interesting. That's why we have on board our expert Jennifer Molinsky from Harvard. We have my dear colleague Mr. Katherine Kline from New York, and also very interesting project from Kuching Sarawak, my neighborhood, Peter Fong, to share with you what do they have today. Okay, so I would like to explain to you. Wait, I share screen first. Yeah, who are we? We are PFC International Race Pedestrians recommended program. The city we need is affordable. Can you see me? The slide? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. We are the forum that keep promoting affordable housing in the world, especially encourage private part to take part, because we cannot let our governments work alone. Our governments is only facilitator and also regulator. The player are us, the private part. Only with our support, this affordable housing will be implemented in any place in the world. So we have a book that we produce. We launch every October, especially during the World Habitat Day, and this is going to be the volume 5. Is it, Danielle? Volume 5, right?
Yes.
Volume 5. This is the book that we are looking for some participant as well, and maybe Danielle will explain to you later. This is a book that in conjunction with the UN Habitat program. This is the part of the book. The volume 4. You can see this Kapiolani project that our colleagues from Timothy Yi from Hawaii developed. Very nice affordable housing. 60% for market, for 40% for commercial market. And this is the Central Ala Moana, located also in Hawaii. It's one of the successful affordable housing project. This is the far right is Timothy Yi, our partner. He's the president of the Hawaii Councils currently. Yeah, this is the project from our colleague from Taichung, from Taiwan, president of PFC Taiwan, Lily Chang. Sunshine Air Water, affordable housing and happiness home. Okay, this is how the combinations of affordable housing and also happiness. So this is us, just a quick sharing with you. So now I pass the floor to my chair lady, Danielle Grossenbacher, to proceed the forum. Please, Danielle.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm very, very pleased to have you all listening with us this morning. We're going to address a topic that should be of interest to everyone. We're all getting older year by year. And I think it is important to start thinking already now of how we want to live in 10, 20, 40, 50 years from now. And we will discuss today some new trends and new ways of doing things. One of them is actually building homes that are adaptable and that can change according to your needs as you evolve. Another possibility is building communities where different social classes and different age groups mix. And I think maybe, Rusmin, you can put up the slides that I have prepared, just a few slides to give you an idea.
Okay.
I'll give you two examples from the New York City area, one in New Jersey. And so we want people actually to be happy all their life. We just live once, at least that's what we know. And we need to be happy as we can. Next, please. Next.
Yeah, this is
okay. This is a project. Yes, this is a project that is in New Jersey. It's a tower that was developed, and the builders thought it would be for students. And surprise, surprise, half of the requests for the rentals there were from students, and half were by older adults. And the mix is really, really interesting and surprising. The students actually help the older people with their needs, and they go shopping for them. And the older people can keep an eye on the younger kids when they come back to school and the parents are still working, or they can give them advice on different kinds of things. What's special about this is that there's lots and lots of amenities in this building. It is close to transportation and it is affordable. So these are three very important points. Next, please. The other example we're going to see is, that's actually some of the apartments inside the complex. It has spectacular views of Manhattan and the Hudson River. Next, please. It's only one stop from the subway, and it's the subway that goes straight to New York. So this is another development in New York City, one of the largest developments in America. It's called Essex Crossing. It's about 8 buildings. There's a mix of different kinds of buildings. One building is for senior and has a walk-in clinic inside the building. And below all these buildings is a very, very large space with all sorts of amenities. Next, please. And this enables a mix of people from all social classes and generations. And it's really, really appreciated. In the lower left corner, you'll see a public park that's underground, where there are thousands of plants that were generated by light coming from above. So it comes through pipes, and it is augmented by mirrors. And they were able to create a spectacular underground garden that you can admire as you do your errands. And it's a fantastic place to mix and relax. Next, please. I think you went the wrong way. Okay, next. Next again. Okay, so we'll see here. No, just before, can you go back, please? Go back once, because we have a graph that is from the UN that is very important, just above this one. Yes, okay. If you look at this, those are the UN projections of the population. And there's something very interesting. You'll see that in about 50 years from now, there'll be probably more older people than people below 24 years old, and that which is not the case right now. Now we have the reverse situation. And this is because there's a significant lower fertility rate right now that we're seeing. Most women now marry like 10 years older than they did 10 years ago. They used to marry around 24, 25. Now they marry around 36, actually. So they don't get 12 kids like it happened in the 50s. Or 6 kids like I have. They usually have 2 or 3 children, which is the case of all my children, actually. So we see, because of this decline in fertility, we'll probably have a larger population of elder adults. So it's really time to think about the great way to live as you get older and keep a beautiful lifestyle. So this is my presentation. You can show the last picture, which is my contact info. If you have any project or any idea or trend that you would like to highlight, we can do that in our next volume of The City We Need is Affordable. Ignore my cell phone number. I'm having difficulty with my cell phone right now. Just contact me by email, dgny22@gmail.com. And it's free to have a one page in our next book. You can just send me 2 or 3 pictures of an existing project, a completed project, with 2 or 3 paragraphs, and the business card of the person who's responsible for that idea or development. And we'll publish that free of charge. So it's an opportunity for people who've had smart ideas and projects to generate more business in the future. So now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Mrs. Katherine Kline. Are you ready, Katherine, or not?
Well, I'm totally ready, but the technology is not cooperating. I'm unable to show my pictures. So let me just go forward, and what I will do is make sure that you have them.
Yeah, this is it. Katherine, which one?
Okay, that would be great. If you can show the screen, I'm going to be reading the text, but if you can go with me, Rusmin, that would be terrific. I did have a PowerPoint, but technology.
You want to show the picture, or how? Okay, this is the picture.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, but just before that, I would like to introduce Katherine, because not everybody knows her. A lot of people do. Katherine is co-chair of the Older Person Constituent Group of GAP. GAP is the General Assembly of Partners. It's a civil society group that advises and discusses with the UN, mostly UN Habitat. The main goal of that group, there are 17 groups in GAP, and definitely if you're interested in joining GAP, it's free. You can certainly contact Kathy or myself. The main goal of Kathy's group is to change the view that we have of older adults from a medical model of people needing help, financial or medical or otherwise, to a group of people who actually have something to provide to society, some knowledge. I think that's very, very important. As we all grow older and society will grow older, I think it's important to change our vision of older adults. Kathy is also the secretary of GAP right now, and she attends numerous meetings every day, and she takes fantastic notes. So really, Katherine is a treasure of knowledge on almost any topics that you can think of. It's just amazing what she accomplishes in 1 week. And yeah, in 1 week and 1 day. Kathy is also a UN volunteer representative for INPEA, which is the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. So Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Rusmin, for trying to showcase the pictures. I would like to thank both you and Danielle for this opportunity to focus on critical issues as you said, of affordable, safe, and accessible housing for seniors. And secondly, for inviting me, as you said, Danielle, to share some of the knowledge that I've acquired, because I am retired and in the fortunate position living here in New York City of being able in person when it was open to join many UN events, and virtually I'm attending even more now through my computer. So as background, as Danielle said, the world is aging rapidly, especially in urban areas. In fact, 200,000 people turn 60 every day. And that's, as Danielle was saying, a tribute to better health, better education, better facilities, and not something to be lamented, but to be encouraged and to be dealt with. And by 2015, it's estimated that 1 in 6 people in the world will be over 65, many living in developing countries, which is something we don't necessarily think about. We think about Japan or Germany, but the aging is happening, fortunately, in many areas of the world. COVID is going to be a setback, but I don't think a permanent one. The problem is that we are not keeping up with providing adequate housing for those who want to age in their urban communities, those who move there by choice, and those who have fled insecure situations and now joined other refugees, many forced to live in informal settlements outside of city centers. So first, I'm going to provide you on some background in the United States where I live. Since the 1990s, 250,000 public housing units have been demolished. Many major cities, including Chicago, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and New Orleans, have chosen to eradicate much of their public housing stock. New York City, as I said, where I live, is one of the last to raise funds to build and protect affordable housing. Vouchers were offered for rents in cities, but those rents have skyrocketed, creating more and more expensive units for wealthier people, but not for those who can't afford them. Aging in place has meant fewer houses are on the market. Interesting, leaving more difficulty for younger people, first-time buyers, to purchase them. It's interesting that a record, they were saying, of 25% of homeowners in the US in last year lived in their home for more than 20 years. That is up from 14% just a decade earlier. So what are some of the solutions that provide housing for the growing senior populations? COVID, as we know, accelerated the rate of multi-generational living, combining family resources to purchase larger homes to accommodate grandparents, parents, and grandchildren. In fact, in a national US survey from April to June of 2020, 15% of homeowners bought multi-generational homes, the highest share since 2012 when that question was asked. One option is called accessible dwelling units, ADUs, which can either be attached to a home, a single family home, for example, a garage or a detached unit next to the home. Municipalities in the US require a law that approves them in their local codes. And we're now finding older family living in these ADUs because they don't need that space that they had in a larger home, and they are then giving up their larger home for adult children and or their families. And AARP International has, and I will include the resource, has a website of a guidebook on these accessible dwelling units because they're becoming more and more popular. The second option in the United States is called Continuing Care Retirement Communities, or CCRCs. For example, my healthy 96-year-old mother lives in a very nice one-bedroom that is part of one in Cincinnati, Ohio. There are floors for those that require additional care. The ERS, or Episcopal Retirement Services, that owns and operates her facility, also has ones for lower income residents that is supported by a variety of city, state, federal grants, as well as private donations. What is critical is to develop affordable housing that is located in urban centers with support from city incentives. One international developer, which I found out about through one of your webinars, was able to do this because the city donated the land. And there's a mix of higher cost housing, stores, green spaces, so that one of the critical issues is not to think of housing older persons as if we were somehow to be avoided and as we age put aside. We want to be in the center of city life. The third option are the new affordable apartments, not just for older residents. Danielle mentioned one of them here in New York. And we published in 2018 a Designing New York Quality Affordable Housing. Again, I will include that in the resources. It was a collaboration of the New York City Public Design Commission, the Fine Arts Federation of New York, and the American Institute of Architects, the New York chapter. A larger working group included the Department of Planning, Housing, Preservation, Development, the Department of Design and Construction, and the Economic Development Corporation. So you see it's a real collaboration of multi-city agencies and departments. And the publication focused on 7 case studies with much information of what would make the site work in terms of site, height of buildings, integrated circulation into shared and public spaces, use of materials with low environmental impact that's easily maintained, play areas, and large open spaces. So that first picture that you see is Creston Avenue residence in the Bronx. It was completed in 2015 with a hard cost of $230 per square foot. What it includes, you can see in the picture, is a wide inset building entrance with solar screens that mitigate heat gains within the units. And it shows a quality affordable housing unit. You can see in the bottom of that picture. That shows that they don't have to be low quality. And in fact, I remember Danielle and Rusmin in the webinar by the man who talked about housing in Hawaii, I believe. He said the key was to make it quality. If it didn't have quality, people wouldn't use them. The second building is Frost Street Apartments. If you can go down, Rusmin, one more picture. That has 47 units of permanently affordable housing in an increasingly gentrified Brooklyn neighborhood. And this is a big issue, I'm sure, around the world, which is as people have moved into neighborhoods and acquired housing, they either tear down the old housing and build new, or what they do is improve it, which is terrific. But what ends up happening is that the local residents can no longer afford that neighborhood. The prices of everything go up. So it was critical that this Frost Street Apartments had affordable permanent housing, not just temporary for a period of time. There were 8 units that were set aside for adults with developmental disabilities. And here are pictures. Go back up one. I think you're ahead, Rusmin. Can you go back one, please? Go back one picture, because I want to show there. See how nice that open space design is. And this is, again, affordable, low-cost housing quality. Now to the next picture. In Morrisania section of the Bronx, this is a much larger unit that promotes healthy aging with an indoor gym, outdoor fitness circuit, windows that bring in light, and a hydroponic farm on the rooftop. That again is encouraging healthy aging. And many of you may or may not know that the UN has endorsed the decade of healthy aging. So these types of units fit in perfectly with that sort of model. On to the next one, Rusmin. Use of 3D printing and modular construction. These are, next picture, please, Rusmin. Keep going. There we go, the 3D printing. Do you see it on the screen? That's flexible and quick and can be made less expensively according to a 2019 report by Kinsey and Company. The savings come from the accelerated building timeline. This form of construction is being used to 3 4-story modular multifamily buildings in San Francisco, the Bay Area, and near Philadelphia. Eco-friendly materials were used. Now, a fourth option that I want to introduce to you is called co-housing. That's defined when a group gets together to share a large house or to construct separate units within separate spaces, and they share a common area, often for dining or a communal room to get together. Next picture is the Natalie Salmon House in Chicago. It's a 5-story, 53-unit building for lower income people, young adults, and families with children. Seniors live in 28 private apartments on the first 4 floors and 15 units for family style housing. They share meals, as I said, common areas, and often engage in common activities. All areas are fully accessible for disability. It's located near shops and amenities. And again, I have the reference to see them. There is a picture you can see of multiple age people sharing a meal together. A 5th option is called shared housing. This occurs when older urban persons share homes with students, for example, who help out modestly in return for getting free space in expensive cities. Matchmaker home sharing programs like the one operated by the New York Foundation for Seniors pairs people who have extra living space, but who want company to help with chores, extra income, or all 3 of those desperate for affordable housing. It screens guests. Another example is Home Share Vermont. And again, I will share all these links. That has been serving people in Vermont since 1982. It also utilizes the screening and matching process, focusing on safety and security. Matches are made based on interest, needs, and lifestyles of other individuals involved. Other solutions, something called the Village Movement. This comprises 280 organizations in towns, cities, and neighborhoods and apartment complexes. Members pay an annual dues of between $250 to $450, and the villages hire a coordinator to oversee these services. Village arrange social gatherings, cultural outings, and they vet a handyman to provide services in healthcare agencies, sometimes negotiating discounts. Now I'm going to move to what exists in other countries. In Singapore, for example, the government offers heavily subsidized apartments for sale, giving an incentive for young adults to live near their parents. Clarion House Group in the UK is a based nonprofit that serves the bottom 20% of socioeconomic strata. It's the largest social landlord in the country with a heritage of over 100 years. More than 350,000 residents live in a Clarion home. They have access and support from a charitable foundation which invests in improving the lives of residents in communities. They have 2,000 new homes a year. This is in England, while investing and regenerating in its existing stock. And I want to just add a note, because I read this morning from the Center for Better Aging that the issue of having to upgrade existing homes is a huge one in the UK, where many homes are not suitable for older persons, actually for many of the people who live in them. And that is an issue that they are beginning now to address, whereas Clarion started 100 years ago doing that. Blacksmith Lane in Bromley, London is going to be their first site to be planned that uses age-friendly design principles from the onset for multi-generational living. And this is a design that they use that deals with thinking about how the homes will work for all ages over time. They use innovative approaches to ensure that the houses will accommodate all the shifting needs in terms of the number of residents, their functional ability, and their ages. Let's see, Plaza de America is in Alicante, Spain. In 2003, Municipal Project for Intergenerational Housing and Community Services created 244 affordable units in urban areas. And the final example is in Unley, Australia, that engaged senior citizens to help craft and apply principles for co-housing options to meet a demand for aging in place that is affordable, decent, and accessible. With the team's success, blocks which were created once ineligible for density increases could now see the density of housing units triple. The zoning change was only the first step. Now we need to get private developers to take advantage of the new land rules. So just to recap, there are multiple avenues to provide affordable, quality, accessible meaning for people of all functional abilities, housing in all areas. And what is really critical, we heard in a talk by the Clarion person that I attended 2 days ago, was you have to first listen to the residents. You need to find out what their requirements are, what their desires are. And then he said, with their 100 years of experience, they've really developed a pattern based on listening to people's needs in housing so that they can provide at a good quality and good cost for the kind of home that they deserve and that they need. And I thank you very much for listening.
Yep. Thank you, Katherine. It looks like it reminds me of my doctorate paper, Katherine.
Well, I did this all last week because I found out I was
feeling like we are having doctorate lecturer.
Well, I will send it on so that people can read it and absorb it at their leisure.
Fabulous, fabulous paper. Okay, Danielle, over to you. Yeah. I will share to all of them tonight. Okay.
You're still muted, Danielle.
Yeah. Yes, well, definitely. I think that there were lots of very interesting ideas. Well, we have to brainstorm a lot on this topic and see also the solutions from different continents. Definitely, I agree with the Clarion Group that listening to the people's needs and desires is crucial. And I find that these needs and desires change as the years go by. So you have to update your information constantly. And I'm sure that's the case in Asia as well. I'm very eager to hear from Victor what's happening in Asia.
Thank you, Danielle. And thank you, Rusmin, for inviting me. And to the rest of the audience, thank you very much for coming in to share the evening or the morning with us. Let me share screen to use that as a talking point. Can you see the screen, Rusmin?
Yes, Fong.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Now we are Eden on the Park actually is the first integrated aged care facility in Malaysia. And for that matter, I believe it's one of the first in this region in Southeast Asia. We promote the idea of an integrated aged care facility because we look after people who are relatively healthy, who wish to come in and live into a community. The group that I would call the go-go, they're still active, they're socially very connected, and they still like to do things and pursue their hobbies and so on. So that's the go-go group. But eventually, for aging in place, sooner or later, people will need to have some form of assistance to go by. And they move into the slow go kind of a stage where they need assistance, they need help and so on. And to a certain extent, perhaps some form of care along the way. And eventually, all of us, I think whether you like it or not, will end up into what I call the no-go stage, where you actually need long-term.
Fong, sorry, your screen not moving, Fong.
Okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Is it moving now? Or?
No, not moving.
It's still not. It's still not moving. I will have to start again.
Yeah, please.
You see the screen?
Yeah, cannot do it.
It's good that you tell me that it is not moving.
Yeah. No worry. You still have time.
You can maybe send it to Rusmin in case he could move it for you.
It's supposed to be okay because the first page was
okay.
failing just now.
Is it Is it clear now? Or?
We're seeing
we
you
didn't see
now.
it.
Okay. Is it moving?
No,
We're
not yet.
seeing you.
You have to click
Okay.
share. You click your picture, then click share.
You might want to send it to Rusmin so you have a backup. Rusmin could
I
show
think
it
it's
for
okay.
you. Okay.
Yeah, we see it now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Now it's good.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Finally, I missed a step, I think. Is it okay?
Yes.
So that's the talking points that I wanted to touch on this evening. Number one, also to echo what Danielle and Katherine has spoken earlier, that there is also an aging population in Asia. Challenges faced in providing homes for the elderly, and why corporate Malaysia, for that matter, corporate Asia, is not investing in this kind of facility for the elders. We would like to then introduce Eden on the Park and its underlying concept, and how, as a prototype, we have developed the concept to try to address that issue, which has not been done before in this part of the world. And of course, some ideas also to basically share with everybody tonight on how to build more affordable homes for the elderly. Here are some statistics from Malaysia. I think United Nations says that classified any nation that has got 10% over 60 to be an aging nation. Of course, when you're 25, 30%, you're an aged nation. And Malaysia was predicted about 7-8 years ago to have 9.9% of the population above 60 by 2020. But actually last year, we had something like 10.3% of the population over 60. So we are definitely into the aging stage. And going forward to 2030, that is expected to get up to 15.1%, and then 2050, 20.4%. The government and the Prime Minister's department has actually recognized this problem and is urgently trying to do something to meet the needs of the growing segment of this society. Now, we are no different from the rest of Asia, in particular, some of the older countries that are around in the region. China has got virtually 1 in 5 persons that are over, expected to be over 60 by 2025. Hong Kong is 28.2. And I suppose the oldest nation in this region is Japan, 35%, expected to be in 2025. And Singapore is 30. Now, there's definitely a growing market. And this group of people that is increasingly large in proportion to the population, they have certain specific needs. And through a lot of brainstorming sessions, focus group meetings, and so on, when we first started this project in Malaysia, we actually asked what are the things that senior citizens would want to have. Now, basically, it's social. They want to continue to have friends and remain socially connected and be able to do things together and keep busy. Support services convenient to them when they need to change bulbs and fix the toilets and so on, that they could actually have somebody to call in and be dependable upon. Feeling at home. Security is important. They normally, typically would travel a lot, and they would want to come back to a home that is safe and secure without being broken into and vandalized and so on. The other factor that we identified from our focus group and discussions was that they need a place that is easily accessible, well-planned, safe to move around without the risk of falls and so on. And of course, as they live longer, they wouldn't want to change. They want to have a comfortable lifestyle that they can use and live long into their retirement. And longevity is a blessing. It is also a problem as we go forward, that people are now living into their 80s, 90s. And like, I think it was Kathy who said that the number of people who are going to live up to 100 or older is going to be getting more and more as a percentage of the population. But with all this, why is it, we ask, that corporate Malaysia or corporate Asia for that matter, and even the government is not putting a foot into this business? There is this strong taboos and social cultural prejudices that's still very much prevalent in this country, as well as in the region. The Asian culture associated with the concept of filial piety. Now, what it means really is that for Asians, particularly the Chinese, for the children not to look after the parents, to live with them under the same roof, is considered to be non-filial. And for parents who can't bring up children that eventually takes the responsibility of looking after them, they have a sense of failure as well, that they're not brought up their children in the pure Confucianism kind of standards, you know, for them to be responsible to look after themselves. So they have this sense of failure as well. Negative perceptions for existing care facility, normally very depressing house-based kind of facility where people go in. A lot of services in nursing homes are not, unfortunately, not properly run, not professionally run, and there are abuses and stories kind of going around of people being mistreated and so on. There are also very serious economic factors, which is really associated with the higher cost of building age-friendly facilities. You have to put in ramps for high-rise vertical living. You have to have bigger lifts so that they can have, in the event of emergency, bring in stretchers and wheelchairs to bring people down in emergencies. So because of that, a lower return on investment for a lot of kind of developers and corporations who might be considering going into this particular segment of business. And lack of successful precedents and model in managing those. I've always said that, you know, retirement facilities are not just brick and mortar, selling homes. I think it has got to have a support system. It has got to have programs, activities to keep people busy and be connected with society so that they can be active and stay healthy. And the government doesn't have a set of rules to govern the development, the orderly development of this kind of facility. For instance, a nursing home, if it is to be licensed by the Ministry of Health, has to follow the guidelines which is actually applied to private specialist medical hospitals. So in other words, the cost of putting in all those facilities, services, piping in of oxygens, staffing issues, quality of staff, training level of staff and so on, all applies. So for nursing home, which is really not something as kind of demanding as a specialist hospital, we should have a different set of guidelines, I think, to guide developers who are keen on building it so that it will help to reduce the cost. So when we set up to launch into this so-called prototype, we just wanted to build a prototype model for Asia to suit the requirements of the local population as well as the culture and so on. So we set about developing a mission for ourselves, and that is to develop a senior active lifestyle with aged care, which is acceptable to the Malaysian society. Up to now, it is something to shun away, and also financially sustainable under a non-welfare regime. Now, unlike the West, like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Britain, and so on, the government comes in to basically support this kind of facility and to build this kind of facility for the seniors. But in Malaysia, in Asia generally, we don't have that. So the supporting objectives was to provide facilities for senior citizens to live productively yet independently while aging with dignity, and to promote a senior lifestyle as a credible, preferred Malaysian living culture. So this whole statements or couple of statements that I've made between myself and our co-founders basically was to rebrand the whole thing and to make sure that people look at it differently as not a place to shy away from and to shun away from when they retire. It's a place that people would look forward to when they retire, and hopefully they will have a wonderful lifestyle, you know, for the rest of their lives. So our kind of objective was to actually provide amenities and facilities to support a system where residents could age in place and age with dignity. I think either Kathy or Danielle have spoken about aging in place. I think that is really the trend worldwide, and we are also trying to implement that into Malaysia. So basically what it is all about, to build facilities where people can chip in when they are still active and healthy, so that they can form part of the community, join a community where they can do things together. And that was something important for people as they age, to maintain physical well-being as well as preserve their mental health. And to encourage people to live for as long as possible in an independent kind of facility. You have to put in assistive technology and services to encourage them to stay on their own and yet safely, because their physical condition could be monitored by some artificial intelligence. But at the same time, within this facility, to have a nursing facility that is available for them at any point in time that they need care, either post-surgery, post-procedure. They can't live on their own, they need support, that there are facilities that can be, services that can be called for from a nursing facility next door to come into their apartment to look after them. That eventually, if they can't live on their own, in their own apartment, that they could actually move into a care facility within the same village, but having the financial tools and instruments, including reverse mortgaging and so on, to enable them to have a seamless transition from living in an apartment or a home of their own into a care facility. I think that's important, because at a certain age, we all know that certainly tomorrow a person may have a stroke. He can't look after himself. You know? He has to go into a nursing facility. And if the government is not behind funding that facility, somebody has to pay for the bill. And he can monetize and liquidate his assets, which is actually a home in the retirement village. Some trustees can come in to assist them so that they can monetize it and they can use that money to look after their long-term care. So this is, again, after the successful completion of our Kuching project, we are replicating the same kind of concept in the island of Penang, the wonderful island which they dubbed to be the Pearl of the Orient. So we are building some apartments and villas, 300 over units of them, for independent living. And at the same time, the activities and social program would be actually kind of housed in a lovely mansion that has been restored. Formerly, this whole area, if I could just go onto the background of it, was
Where is it? In Penang, which part?
Balik Pulang.
Oh,
Russia.
Balipula.
Yes.
It's my second home. Yeah.
Just about 10 minutes from the airport, you know,
I know, a lot of durian there, I know.
A lot of durian, yes. So this whole place was actually a rubber plantation. And the house there was a mansion, was the general manager's residence on top of the hill. So when they bought over this place, they, after clearing some of the bushes and so on, they found that there was actually an abundant structure there. So my business partner in Penang has actually spent millions of ringgit restoring it to its original state, including using the same material, the tiles, the finishing, and so on. So in it, it is a full-scale restaurant. It has got a kitchen, the horse meals, the horse stables were converted into some quarters. The rubber smoke house was converted into a gym, and then they added on the swimming pool. So that would be where we would like to have some of the activities and programs and so on for the residents of the active living apartment. Now on the left-hand side is a full 100-bedded nursing facility. Now this is open to the public, and I will explain later for purpose of sustainability, ladies and gentlemen. This will be open to public so that it can sustain itself. But at the same time, the facility would then be available for anybody who lives in the apartment who may need temporary assistance, or if eventually they want to move into the care facility, to move over at a special kind of a preferential rate. So that's what we call a complete integrated aged care facility. Now, to do all this, basically, we do not have the technology, we do not have the trained personnel and so on. So we team up, we learn from the West, and I think one of the best countries in the world today for aged care is actually Australia, and to a certain degree, New Zealand. So we got an operating partner that comes in, that basically help us set up the system, bring in best practices, bring in their technology, and of course their training programs. So we're able to train school leavers to be competent to look after old people professionally. So I just want to show you some of the pictures of what we have in Kuching, and which we hope to replicate and probably improve on when we go to Penang. On the top left hand, you know, we have social programs like monthly introduction dinners for new residents. So we celebrate our birthdays and anniversaries to keep everybody connected. Outdoor activities, we've got a wonderful lake where, you know, residents can go in and paddle on the kayak and do the exercises instead of just restricting themselves to the gym. Lunches and dinners are kind of available, so they don't have to do their own cooking, and while they come down and meet their friends. Activities down here, hobby garden. So we have plenty of facilities to keep people active, so they can adopt a plot where they can plant their herbs, their vegetables, their fruits. A secondary jungle that we planted with hundreds and hundreds of trees, where we have a jogging path for people to walk and exercise or jog. The well kind of known activity in Asia, karaoke, where you can sing your hearts out after a few drinks. And this is a picture of the active living apartments and villas that we have. I just show you some more pictures here. This is an internal thing. I don't know whether this is as good as the one that Kathy was showing us earlier. Beautiful gardens and forest parks. And we also believe in connectivity between elders and animals, because I think that is life and that gives them a purpose to live and to have something to enjoy and relate to. Our lady here, also by the name of Katherine, she is, you know, kind of admiring her own passion fruit, which is almost ready for harvest. And some of our villas are set next to our wonderful lake, and that has got a resort feel. And would you believe this is the standard that we have created for our care residents in Kuching? Proper beds. They are nursing beds, but we purposely designed them not to look like hospital beds. So they have timber panels and so on that look more homely. Train staff to keep the people active and accompany them throughout the day, do activities, tell stories and so on. We have a full kitchen here, professional kitchen that serves everything from liquid food to people who need them for tube feeding, all the way up to solid food, people who have got dietary requirement and so on. So we have specialist cooks that basically look after all those needs. Activities, parties, we even have a beauty salon there where we keep people well groomed and looking good. Yeah. And people will be encouraged to continue activities that they love. A golfer would have a putting green. They don't have to go to the golf course for that. We brought children in to provide this kind of a happy environment for the older adults, so that they can still connect to the younger generation. Medical facilities to look after them as and when they require help. And this at the bottom left-hand corner is actually a very, very interesting program. Before COVID, on Saturdays, the people in the active living apartments and so on who are musicians and good singers, they actually come over and perform for those who are staying in the nursing center. And that is a lovely, lovely kind of a relationship that they establish for themselves. And physiotherapy and exercises, even a manual kind of a bowling alley that we have, birthday parties and foot massages. Okay. Now, just to address some of the needs, I think, of this generation of people and how to make housing affordable for them. We have some thoughts here to share with everybody who is listening tonight. You know. Affordability has to be in terms of cost of development. How can we make it affordable for this age group of people? And sustainability in the long-term management of this facility. And we have to acknowledge that there are serious limitations for the elderly in trying to buy houses for their own. They have very low savings. I think we are still not a very rich region. So a lot of people have very little savings that would last them perhaps only about 5 to 10 years after their retirement. And at this age, particularly in Asia, I think when you're over 60 and 65, there is actually no chance for you to be able to get a mortgage loan to buy a home at that age. And to achieve affordability, how to lower the cost of development and managing the cost of long-term management. So here are some ideas. I think lowering costs of development, government to provide subsidy for development. In fact, this is something that we promoted to the federal government when we developed Kuching, our prototype, to tell them that, look, we need help if you want somebody to start building this kind of facility. So they gave us some money to develop infrastructure and so on, access roads and so on. So that helps a bit of reducing the cost of development. Providing state land rather than buying commercial land to develop this kind of property, that would certainly help. We have provided this idea to state governments as well, and they've responded very positively, at least in part, supplying some of the land for this development. Relaxation of planning rules. For instance, the general rule in Malaysia, for instance, is that for every apartment, you need 2 cars. So we have to sell the idea to the Penang government, for instance, to say that, look, at that age, and besides, a lot of people are singles or they're widows or widowers, you don't need 2 cars. And that actually saves a lot of development costs. In Australia, I think in some states, they only require 0.3 cars to an apartment. So we are only building 1 car for an apartment and assuming that everybody drives, even at the age of 80, 90 years old. Reduction of capital contribution for connection of electricity, water, telecom. I think this would be something that the government will have to look into if they want to encourage this development of facilities for their seniors. Accelerated tax deductibility of certain aged care facility costs. For instance, equipment for physiotherapy, gyms, medical equipment, and so on. If those can be considered under tax deductibility on an accelerated level. Lowering the cost of home units, we only need to build smaller homes so that it's more affordable to the individual, but you need bigger common areas so that common activities can be staged in those common areas. You want to encourage people to come out of their units and kind of be with friends and companions, you know. Relaxation of central bank rules for financing of senior homes. You know, the central bank will have to come out and encourage banks to provide loans for seniors to buy their homes. Special interest concessions, reverse mortgage, or to use their superannuation fund contribution to buy their homes for retirement. I think these are ideas that we continually are working with the government to try to get them to understand the needs of this particular segment of the industry. Long-term sustainability, I'm actually coming to the end about Rusmin. Cross-subsidy, like in this case, we open the care center to the public so that we bring in revenue to make it sustainable, so that when services are required by owners of apartments and residents in the village, they can be provided at a subsidized rate. Tax incentives, the government could actually come in to encourage a deductibility of money that people spend for aged care to get tax relief on that. And of course, various government assistance that other countries are actually providing for this industry. So my final slides, this is my favorite actually, as far as Eden on the Park in Kuching is concerned. What it depicts is this: I think in the twilight days of our life, it can also be a beautiful and interesting stage of our life as well. So thank you very much, Pak Rusmin.
Okay, thank you. Fabulous presentations.
Thank you.
Victor, I did not have your resume. Could you tell us a few words about you? What are you doing currently, etc.?
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sure you have about 10 titles.
No, actually, when Pak Rusmin asked me, I was actually too shy to give it away, you know. But anyway, if my arms are twisted, I would say I was a trained accountant. As a chartered accountant, actually, I retired as a partner of EY, one of the big four. But I always have got a passion for aged care. From the days when I was trained in New Zealand, I have a lot of host families that I still have contacts with. And over time, gone back to see them, and some of them live in wonderful retirement homes, you know. And the question came to my mind, why can't we have it in Asia? And governments are not doing that. of course, later on in life, when me and my siblings have to look after our 90-odd-year-old parents, when it's just dawned on us, how difficult it is to look after the aged. So it is, I think, that kind of experience that basically just gel our resolve to want to try something. And I must say, when I retired, when I left EY as a poor accountant, it was a big step to come forward with all the savings with a few friends and my family and say, okay, let's put this money in there and try for the good of society. I'm not going to claim that as my own kind of decision. A few of us in the family and friends and so on. And we think it's a noble kind of thing to do, as long as we don't lose money, which thank God we didn't. And we have got a model now that we continue to improve on, and we have business partners that come to us and say, hey, can we replicate it? So it is not just a question of building houses, but a question of also building a system and a lifestyle. Thank you very much, Danielle.
You have a great model, frankly, Victor, and I look forward to you sending us some information for our next book, the publication 5.
I'm inviting you to come over to Malaysia and see what we are doing.
It's beautiful. I'm very impressed. I think you're really, you've got it. You've got it. I think what you're building is really something of the future and will be replicated in many countries. So thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
I would now like to introduce our last speaker today, Jennifer Molinsky. Jennifer holds a PhD in urban planning from the MIT, and she has experience as a practicing urban planner. She is currently Senior Research Associate at Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies, a lecturer in housing at the Graduate School of Design. She leads the center's work on housing and aging, focusing on solutions to increase the supply of affordable housing, which is very, very important. Thank you, Jennifer. And accessible housing and livable communities supportive of the older adults. So that's actually what we've heard in the previous presentation. So we're looking forward to your ideas. Jennifer is also the lead author of the center's major reports on the challenges of housing older adults. And she serves on the steering committee for the Chan School of Public Health Initiative on Health and Homelessness at Harvard. And she co-directs the Healthy Places Design Lab at the Graduate School of Design. So Jennifer, you're highly qualified on this topic today. So we're very eager to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to share my screen here.
Yes.
Hope this all works. Perfect. Okay. So getting some information here. Just to set the stage here, let me go back to my first slide. Right, so the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies is a 60-year-old research institute at Harvard dedicated to advancing understanding of housing issues and informing policy. And it was really 6, 7, 8 years ago that we became very interested in housing and aging, just looking at the demographic trends. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the trends we track related to housing and aging, particularly for those older adults in the US with middle and lower incomes. My overall message is that in the next 10 years or so, we're going to see a huge surge in demand for housing that is more accessible, affordable, better connected to amenities, services, and care. So I'll talk a little bit about those trends driving this need, the big gaps we have now, and then I'll turn to some promising examples that I think are seeking to fill those gaps. I'm a big believer in housing options. There's no one size fits all for older adults, but rather a range of options in all communities that serve the diverse needs and preferences of our older population. So just to set the stage a little bit, like many nations, the US is looking at rapid growth in our older population. The oldest baby boomers are now in their mid-70s, and in the next decade, households in their 80s will be the fastest growing age group in the entire nation. So you can see this in the far right column, where the number of households headed by someone 80 or over is expected to double within the next 20 years. The distribution of US households is changing as well, and by 2038, over a third of households in the US will be headed by someone 65 or over, and 12% of all US households will be 80 or over. And so this is really unprecedented, and it raises some really specific housing issues because those 80 and over are more likely to live alone in the United States. 57% of that age group does. They're more likely to have disabilities or difficulties that require accessibility features and supportive services. Our oldest adults are also statistically most likely to have affordability challenges, which I'll mention in a moment. Before I dive into specific challenges, though, I wanted to sort of talk about the high-level circumstances in the US that make housing and aging population particularly challenging. I think there are challenges everywhere. These are some that are particularly salient to us here. First, housing is not an entitlement. While we have programs that house people with low incomes or provide them support in paying rent, we only serve about a third of older adults who are eligible for this and a quarter of families, because these programs are vastly underfunded. And just because you qualify doesn't mean that you're able to secure housing assistance. We also have programs that help build affordable housing, including for older adults, but these too are limited. And developers of housing for low and moderate income people often have to cobble together funding from multiple programs, which adds enormously to the complexity of the development. There's a provider in my town here that is using local, state, federal programs, more than a dozen sources of funding to subsidy to make it happen. And it gets very complicated very quickly. Two, the US approach to housing in general and housing and aging population more specifically is fragmented, occurring at the federal, state, and local levels. And the federal government itself lacks a comprehensive approach to affordable and fair housing. We have a goal that we established in 1949 of a decent home and a suitable living environment for everyone, but we've lacked a comprehensive roadmap to reach that goal in the years since. And we also have considerable differences in state approaches and in community approaches to age-friendly communities and to affordable housing. Third, when we talk about housing and aging, of course, we want to talk about that link between housing and health and healthcare. And we then have a third challenge in that housing and health policy are made in two different agencies, funded by two different committees in Congress, making coordination around something like supportive services and affordable housing very challenging indeed. And lastly, many of our barriers are super local. They're related to zoning and other land use controls, which makes it difficult to enact city system-wide change. So partly as a result of these overarching challenges and many others, we have some large gaps in affordable, accessible housing, supportive services to those living at home, and to community and age-friendly supports. So let me talk about these for a minute, and then I will turn to promising examples of housing and policy solutions. The first challenge, housing unaffordability, is one of the most difficult to address, and I'm sure that's true everywhere. Given that housing assistance is not an entitlement, that adds significantly to this issue. We're actually at an all-time high of older households that are cost burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income on housing. So over 10 million older households are in that category, and half of those are paying more than half of their income on housing. This chart looks at the numbers of older adults who are cost burdened by renters and owners with and without a mortgage. Most older people in the US do own their home. The home ownership rate peaks at around 80% for those in their late 70s and then drops off a bit. And many owners are cost burdened because they still have a mortgage. 40% of those 65 and over have a mortgage, as do about 27% of those 80 and over. So more and more people are carrying mortgages into late life, which is contributing to these cost burdens. But even 15% of people who own their house without a mortgage are cost burdened simply by the costs of utilities, taxes, and insurance. And finally, older renters are the most likely to be unaffordably housed. Over half of them face cost burdens, and we're seeing rents rise more quickly than Social Security, the income paid to retirees. And we also know that the incidence of cost burdens is higher among the oldest households because incomes tend to decline in older age, whereas your housing payments often stay stable, or if you're a renter, they could even go up. The consequences of being cost burdened, we all know, particularly for those with low incomes, is less money to spend on other things. And I like to point out that most of these things have to do with your well-being. So spending much less money on food, healthcare, out-of-pocket costs. If you're still working, you might still be saving for retirement, so less on that and less on transportation. This chart is looking only at the lowest income tier of people and comparing those who are affordably housed to those who are paying more than half their income on housing. And there's some pretty significant differences, as you can see. So there's a lot more to the affordability challenge that I won't get into today, but I do want to note just a few things. We have some deep disparities among older adults in the US in terms of affordability. A lot of that revolves around access to homeownership. Homeownership, particularly for those who've paid off their mortgages, creates stable housing payments. And people earn a lot of equity in their homes over time, especially if they're staying there for a while. So the median wealth of an older homeowner in the United States is $343,000, of which just under half of that is in the form of housing equity. But for renters, median wealth is under $6,000. And owners' income is also considerably higher than renters. So there's a lot of benefits to accessing homeownership, especially at younger ages when you can build up that equity, but we have really significant gaps by race and ethnicity. And the gap between older Black and older white households is at a 30-year high. So a part of addressing this issue and preparing people better for older age is to address it earlier in younger age in terms of the homeownership. Second, as I mentioned before, housing is not an entitlement. You may not be able to get off a waiting list. You may have to choose unsuitable or lower quality housing if you can't get this assistance that you need. Sometimes the assistance still isn't enough to cover the high cost of housing that we have in some markets. And more, it's middle income older adults who are facing these cost burdens and have a few options in high cost areas. The fact that we serve a third of low-income people who need housing assistance is great, but there's a whole swath who don't qualify for that and really have very few options, especially when you want to bring in supports in the home or some kind of care. Assisted living is really out of reach for most middle-income people. There's a bright spot, thankfully, this year that the budget proposals for federal programs that support the kind of housing I'll talk about for older adults are much bigger this year than in the recent past. So we'll have our fingers crossed that this will result in more money for building affordable housing for older adults. A second challenge is a home that is physically suited to the needs of older adults. And in the United States, very few homes have these key features of accessibility needed by someone with mobility difficulties, such as someone who has difficulty climbing chairs. So in our analysis, we looked at single floor living, so you don't have to go upstairs once you're in your home, a no-step entrance into the home, and extra wide hallways and doorways so that they could be navigable by someone who uses a wheelchair or a walker. And we find that less than 4% of the US housing stock has these three features in combination. Single family homes, which is incidentally where most older adults live, have the least accessible form of housing, less than 3%. But a lot of renters live in single family housing too, so that's a concern. This data came out recently, and it's a new look at accessibility. It shows people's difficulty getting around and using different features in their house. And you can see that these expand very rapidly and among those 75 and over, and with the biggest challenge getting to the bedroom, and likely that has to do with stairs. So these are the kinds of things that we need more of: no step entries, lever style handles on doors and faucets, the walk-in showers. We don't necessarily need to make every unit of housing fully accessible, but there's growing interest in making our homes visitable so that someone who uses a wheelchair or who has trouble with stairs can at least visit your home. And that usually involves those three things that I mentioned on the last slide. I think more and more technology holds promise here too in changing the possibilities. Smart home technology, like the thermostat that you can control from your smartphone, may mean that we don't have to put a thermostat at a lower level to be reachable by a wheelchair user. We don't have to go in and retrofit that. There are stair climbing wheelchairs, narrow footprint wheelchairs that can make it easier to turn and make it not necessary to widen your hallways and doorways. The whole counter in these pictures on the right the whole counter, including the sink and the range, goes up and down in the kitchen. So there's some really amazing technology out there. But I think this is not likely to be widely accessible to lower income people for some time. And this is something we have to keep in mind. So it's very promising, but for the time being, in the affordable housing range, we really need some other alternatives, and that often requires retrofitting the physical home. Various policies and programs are addressing accessibility. We have federal law that requires buildings with 4 or more units to offer universal design features, but there is no national law in place for single family or small apartments. And so some communities, in at least one state, the state of Vermont, have put in place incentives or requirements to ensure that new units are built with accessibility features. These are called visitability ordinances. And some of these require even things like blocking the bathroom wall, not putting in grab bars, but blocking that wall so that it's easier to adapt to later on. We also have a range of policies and nonprofit action to try to help people fund these improvements because they can be quite costly and put this out of reach to people. One of my favorite programs that is talked about a lot here in the United States is the Capable program out of Johns Hopkins, which sends an occupational therapist, a handy person, and I think it's a nurse, to the home of a low-income person who is having trouble using their home. And they spend pretty little money, maybe $5,000, but working with that team to make that house a better fit for the individual. I spoke just now about difficulties with mobility. Of course, many also have limitations in performing self-care and household functions that increase with age, as shown on this chart. And today, most people are relying on unpaid assistance for help with shopping, cooking, and personal care, such as bathing and dressing. Our insurance generally does not cover care and supports in the home, including our insurance for older adults, Medicare. For various reasons, we anticipate that more people will rely on paid care in the future, and we know this is costly. So as this chart shows, the cost of in-home supports and especially assisted living and nursing care, would generally be well out of reach of the typical older adult's monthly income. It would eat up most of it or exceed it all. And then we go to the question of, well, then you tap your wealth. And for moderate and low income homeowners, most wealth is tied up in the homes. So it's possible to access that by borrowing against it or through reverse mortgages, but it's generally not people's preference. And we find that people are reluctant to do that. And for renters, the average net wealth being under $6,000, that gets you 1 to 2 months of care if you exhausted your entire savings. So, you know, the concern with renters especially is that people then go to a nursing home prematurely because Medicare does cover this kind of cost, this kind of care. But it's at a great expense to the healthcare system and to that individual. And again, it's not just the low income households that are challenged. Research a couple of years ago projected that within the decade, there'll be over 14 million middle-income older adults in the United States who have high healthcare and functional needs, and more than half of that group won't have the funds to pay for the care that they need. So solutions to meeting the challenges of bringing care into the home and supporting people who are living at home so that they can stay there longer fall into a couple of options here. One, and most of them are all focused on promoting wellness and helping people stay longer in the homes they choose rather than higher intensity, higher cost levels of care. So we've got a big push for care coordination and service coordination that can be instrumental in promoting wellness. These might be nurses that help people access benefits, coordinate care, make sure that they're doing preventative things for their health. There's a program in Vermont called SASH, Supports and Services at Home, that is one of many pilots around the country that are seeking to do just that. And they're serving people who live together in congregate housing, but also to people who live dispersed in the community. And then, of course, we've got housing with supportive services or service enriched housing or housing plus services. There are many names for this one, but it's basically filling in the gap between living completely independently, and then there's that jump to assisted living and nursing care. But this is filling in that part of the spectrum before that. So you may have access to meals, transportation, laundry, recreation, a service coordinator who will help you navigate your healthcare system during the pandemic, help you get food, get your virtual medical appointments taken care of. but you still are living independently. And a lot of research has shown that this is a model that is prolonging people's ability to live on their own and also lowering the medical bills that they submit. And finally, it matters where housing is located so that people have the opportunities they need to engage in their communities and find the services they need. And so age-friendly efforts come in here. And this is, of course, a worldwide effort, and there's a worldwide network of livable communities. And it entails all of these things, including the housing options I'll talk about in a moment. I like to give a shout out to New York City here because their age-friendly effort is one of the most involved and intricate in the country. They do so much in so many realms in this regard. So to address these multiple issues, we really, I think, need more housing that suits the needs of a very diverse population of older adults. We talk a lot about aging in place in this country, as I think has been said, is true elsewhere. I think there's a lot of confusion around that term. In fact, a colleague and I recently wrote a paper about the confusion around that term. To some people, it means never leaving the house that they're in. And so for that group of people, we really need to focus on retrofits and building up community supports in the places where older people live. For other people, it means anywhere but a nursing home. I want to age in the community and I'm willing to move to do whatever that means. And so for that group, I think we need to think about options where people are so they can stay in their community, but maybe not in that single family house that is becoming difficult to manage and maybe too expensive. So just some of the solutions that we think about, and some of them have already been mentioned today. There's a push in this country for missing middle housing, and this is a lot of the work of Daniel Grossenbacher and his firm Opticos Designs. So many people have seen the image on the top, which is his image. But it's really talking about filling in between big apartment buildings and single family houses. So things like, that first house in the picture on the far left there is actually a 4-unit apartment, but it looks like a single family house, the bungalow court, the side-by-side housing, that kind of thing. Multi-generational housing is becoming more popular, has been said. So single family houses that have flexible floor plans that can move, house an older couple or older adult, but also become a place that an adult child might return to, or a place for an au pair. People of limited means often find this challenging, however, and often, as we know from the pandemic, end up living in crowded conditions in multi-generational households. And I think we really highlighted the difficulty of keeping physical space among family members who might have been frontline workers and older members of the household. The image here on the left I threw in because this is the iconic Boston area triple decker and kind of the original multi-generational housing that we had here. Usually someone in the family owned the building and rented it out, to maybe a child or a parent, and the whole family could use this kind of building. So we have models like this going back generations. I think we really need to think, how do we make it more affordable to do multi-generational housing today when it's under the same roof? I'll get to intentional communities in a minute. The accessory dwelling units that Katherine talked about address a number of needs because they're smaller, more manageable, more affordable. They can be used for a caregiver or for an older adult or couple. And the innovation here, I think, is that more and more communities are figuring out how to remove barriers in their land use regulations. We have companies developing prefabricated models who can deliver an accessory dwelling unit to your backyard, and financing to make them more feasible. So still challenges, but I think something that's definitely getting a lot of attention as a pretty nice way to create some infill affordable options. I am a big fan of village and suburban center housing. Our data shows that most older adults are increasingly concentrating in suburban settings and low density settings. And again, helping people stay where they are, but giving them a house to move to if that's what they choose, that is more suitable to them, that is perhaps located in the little town center or the village center. These are images from my town and the town next to me. We have 13 villages here in Newton, Massachusetts. We're on the mass transit line. There's so many reasons why this makes sense, I think, in order to help people stay in their communities. We have intentional communities. I think Katherine mentioned this as well. The top picture, or the left-hand pictures and the one on the very top on the right, are all from multi-generational communities in Berlin, Germany, that we're studying as part of a project to see what the capacity to do more of this here would be. And these show basically a new construction, the rehab of an old apartment building, and the reuse of an old school. Katherine mentioned co-housing, and then there's the model on the bottom, the treehouse, is a really interesting model for people who are adopting children out of the foster care system, live here with their foster children and their adopted children, and older adults also live on the site in affordable units, but everyone participates and volunteers in the life of the community and in supporting those families and those children. So that's a really neat model. There's a couple of those around the country. And it's made possible by a great partnership with the town, with the Department of Children's Services and the state, and with a nonprofit housing developer. And then I mentioned the service enriched housing. This is an example of a recent building that just went up around here in Brookline, Massachusetts, with 49 apartments for low-income older adults, and then some, I guess it's actually, I'm sorry, so over 60 apartments for low-income adults, older adults. 3 of them are at the market rate. And then the amenities that happen on this site include fitness classes, wellness service, cultural, social, intergenerational programming. Daily meals often happen at places like this, care coordination, translation services, and 24-hour response, which I think is very important. And I have been told by residents is a key to making them feel more secure, that there's always someone there who will answer their call button. I want to point out the one I just showed you is in the center of this, but this is part of a community that has seen a lot of collaboration and development in the senior housing realm. So the first picture is of the town's senior center. The second is the house I just showed you. The third is another service enriched housing development that's just down the street. These have ground floor retail, they have access to parks, transit. They've all been working together with the business community to create more business-friendly, businesses, benches, all that in this area. So it's not just what one individual developer can do, it's also this combination of really working together and building off of each other. There are, of course, options for higher level care. I think the ones that we have seen most in the United States are the greenhouse homes, which offer nursing care in much more family-like settings, smaller groupings, less regimented and institutional, more of like a family-like setting. And I know that these other models are of interest to us too. We haven't seen quite as much movement there here in the United States. I just want to end with, what are we learning from the pandemic? I think this has been an incredible year of innovation and pivoting by housing providers, by developers. These images come from a guidebook that was put together by Mass Design, a design firm here in Massachusetts that we participated in last summer. And the goal was to try to figure out, how do you design for community, but also for safety? So how do you create spaces for people to interact and avoid social isolation, which we know is a significant issue, but also whether it be coronavirus and the pandemic or some other future thing we don't want to think about, how do we provide a healthy and safe living environment? And this guide goes into all sorts of the public realm, the semi-public realm, the semi-private realm, and the realm of the apartment. I think the pandemic has also shown us the importance of housing-based service delivery. It has been those places that have those service coordinators, who have staff on hand, who are able to deliver to people in the community, that have really facilitated, people getting food, people getting medicine, getting to their doctors. But it's also really shown us the digital divide. And this is a really significant thing as we look to more technological solutions. We look to addressing social isolation by having people jump on a Zoom. The digital divide is wide and deep, especially among the older adults and those who have lower incomes. So these are just things that we need to think about. So I will end here, and oops, please feel free to reach out, check out our website, and connect with me on email. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much, Jennifer. I think we've heard some very interesting examples, and I think our minds will work quickly today. We've actually went a little bit over the time we were allotted, so thank you for everyone who's still with us. I saw that there were some questions on the chat. I don't know whether we have time for 1 or 2 questions. It's up to you, Rusmin, to decide, but I want to thank all the panelists, which were very, very interesting. So Rusmin, do we have 1 or 2 questions that could be addressed quickly or not?
Yes, we have some questions from audience that actually asking for the size of the Eden Park, the footprints and rooms, and the size of the land, Victor.
That's very interesting about Rusmin. Basically, we have a 8.5 acre development in Kuching. And Penang, we are going to have 6.27 acres. I think that's in the process of getting its final approval for building. In Kuching, we have 104 apartments, but for the purpose of testing the market, we also built some single-story villas. I think those are age-friendly villas, but all of them, I think for the purpose of the Asian culture and family kind of values and so on, we build them into dual keys. So in other words, there's a main unit and there's also an attached unit, which has got separate doors and so on, to allow children, if they have children or maids, helpers, staying with them, they have their independent apartments and so on. In terms of square feet, if I can just use, in America, you use square feet rather than meters. The villas are about 2,000 square feet, and the apartments are roughly about 1,005 to 1,006. Now, they're all standard because when we first started building this, we wanted to build it for basically for the middle income. So they come from bigger homes, they downsize, they don't want to downsize into a 600 square feet kind of apartment, you see. But when we move into Penang, for instance, we are going to build a lot of smaller units as well, because we realize that there are lots of people who are singles, so they don't need a 1,500, 1,600 square feet kind of apartment. Yeah. Would that answer your question, Rusmin?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So any questions from your side, Danielle?
No, I think that's fine. Thank you very much. I've truly, truly appreciated all your interventions. I think we have some brilliant ideas and solutions that are implemented already. And we have to keep thinking as the population changes, actually, that's a very good slide to show. We're going to have an aging population, as I mentioned, and we are going to be concerned ourselves. So the more we think about it and find solutions, the better. And as was mentioned, one of the main problems is the money. A lot of people, even from the middle class, can no longer afford such great units that are being planned right now with care and all sorts of facilities. So we have to think of how we're going to address this situation. Low income and middle income housing for people who are aging. We have to think of financing solutions, as was mentioned by Victor and Jennifer also, I think. So thank you very much to all, and hoping to see you on our next webinar, which will be at the end of September.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I leave the last words to you, Rusmin.
Yeah. I think the most important part is beside the stakeholder roles, actually governments, as Victor said, governments. We saw what happened in New York. We saw what happened in Malaysia and as well as in Singapore. Government's policy is one of the most important factor, because the country must be present. Government must be there because it's concerning about the life of their citizens. Okay, sometimes we were so busy, but on the other side we forget our parents also growing older and older. You know what I mean, Danielle? Sometimes I'm surprised. Oh, my dad become that older now. What I'm doing for the last 20 years. Because yeah. And the other one is next batch. I think we must bring a Japanese developer and also Singapore, because I went to Japan so many times, travel a lot. I saw a lot of elderly care housing. Very interesting, Danielle. They're driving a taxi, because you know taxi driver in Japan, they are above 60 years old. I asked him, where do you stay? He said, I don't stay with my son because I don't want to bother them. I want to enjoy my life with my friends, my age, so I can karaoke, I can play billiard, play snooker after works, and fabulous. I went there. I want to a Daiwa group development. They invite me to speak there, and I saw fabulous. It's like a 5-star hotel, Danielle.
Yeah, like Eden on the Park, that we just heard about.
Yeah. Thank you, Danielle.
This one is more like something like full services apartment, Daniel. They can have swimming, they have a karaoke, they have a snooker, they can play cards with their friends. Because I don't want to stay with my son because we cannot get along. Yes, he can visit me every weekend, but staying with him is not a solution. We argue each other. So this is what they need, Daniel. We must listen to them. We cannot force them to stay us sometimes. Yeah, yes. If you married a good wife, if you were married a speaker's wife, you will be in trouble.
Yes, well, actually, Timothy Yee from Honolulu, which we had on our webinar number 2, just mentioned that his motto is follow the people's needs.
Yep.
Yes.
And I think that's very important. And we as a private sector, we need to find ways to find the money to be able to follow the people's needs and ask people what they want and build what they want. And what they want will change in time, of course. But I think it's very important to have the private sector involved in senior housing. And up until now, it's been mostly governments in every country. And the purpose of these webinars is to show the private sector that there is money to be made by addressing this huge demand of affordable housing, where the supply is like this, the demand is like this. And unfortunately, the private sector builds for the ultra rich, where the demand is this small and the supply is this large. So we have to change the situation. And I hope that the people who are listening today think of a way of getting involved in development of affordable housing for all. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We should speak loudly the true gap and PFC to UN Habitat, Danielle. We must make something like a resolution or some recommendations to UN Habitat that they can maybe socialize and a bit forcing those countries that put more effort and more effort and more pro-business policy. I can say pro-business policy, because businessmen always follow the government policy. We cannot say we can't control the policy. No, we want always, at least from aspect of financing, infrastructure, help. They will have a lot of our works in the private sector.
It has to be a public,
it's a joint effort.
Public-private partnership, I think. It
Okay.
has to be a public.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Private
public-private
partnership.
partnership. Yes, that's the key word. So that's why we are encouraging this kind of a scheme. Katherine, you have any comment? Last comment? Katherine? Okay. Oh,
You're muted,
yeah.
Katherine.
You are muted. I saw that you are co-host as well, actually. Okay. Then I think we are over time, and we have to say goodbye. And see you in our next webinar. Today we achieved almost 80 participants until now. Wow, it's very interesting situations. Thank you, Jennifer, our expert. Peter Fong, my brother. I will see you in Penang, my hometown, and my second home as well. Danielle, I'll see you in Hawaii. Aloha in October. Our Habitat Day, I will come. Yeah, Ferrero,
Okay.
Ramon.
Thank you.
Thank
you very
Katherine
much.
Kline, and all my friends from all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. See you again
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.